Hello friend, I want to tell you about the Jeep Cherokee XJ car. Engines and gearboxes. The Jeep Cherokee XJ had 5 engines, including 3 petrol and 2 diesel. I'll point out right away that we'll find 4 engines on our market because the 2.8-liter V6 unit from Chevrolet is a total exotic. It wasn't offered in Europe. The easiest version here is the 4.0 R6 or the 2.5 TD diesel. The 2.5 petrol or 2.1 TD diesel are less common. So we'll focus on these engines. In the case of the 2.5 engine, power increased with the change of the fuel system. Early versions had a carburetor, then single-point injection until in 1991 the multi-point injection Mopar appeared. However, this engine was withdrawn with the facelift. The 4.0 engine is technically related to the 2.5. It is almost the same design, only with fewer cylinders. Like its smaller brother, the 4.0 also went through successive phases of modernization. Although it always had multi-point injection, only from 1991 it received the Mopar system. Both units were paired with manual gearboxes with 5 speeds, but in the case of the 4.0 it was rare, while in the 2.5 it was standard. Here also 4-speed gearboxes. With the smaller engine, on the contrary, the configuration with an automatic was rare, usually 3-speed for the 2.5 or 4-speed for the 4.0. There were several suppliers of gearboxes, depending on the engine version and year. Diesel engines were not used interchangeably with petrol engines. Initially, until 1994, only Renault 2.1 TD units were used, also for the American market. As the car's popularity in Europe grew and expectations grew, this primitive and weak design was replaced with the Italian-made VM 2.5 TD engine with higher power and much better characteristics. Which engine to choose? The answer to this question is simple: F4.0 petrol with an automatic. This unit is very durable and simple, and at the same time powerful and works pleasantly. It lacks nothing, and if you are disappointed with the fuel consumption, it will accept LPG without a problem. With an automatic, it creates an ideal configuration. Besides, finding a 4.0 with a manual is difficult. The recurring problems of this engine are problems with the electrics as well as with the whole car, and leaks. You can fight the first endlessly and nothing will be done. The electrics work randomly, and with the second some fight effectively, others ignore it. The fact is, however, that if anything bad happens to this engine, the problem lies either in the electrical system or the engine has been destroyed. Destroying it is difficult because such situations occur either as a result of serious overheating or loss of oil. Now that we know which engine to choose for this car, let's move on to the others because they should also work well in some cases. The 2.5 petrol engine is not bad in itself because it is almost identical to the 4.0. It's just that the 4.0 is clearly more powerful and paired with an automatic. The 2.5 Cherokee almost always has a manual gearbox, so it is less comfortable and more difficult to drive off-road. It provides good performance, but has a different, more high-revving characteristic. Maximum torque occurs at higher revs, but here we have 5 gears at our disposal in the 4.0 automatic. 4. This engine burns similar amounts of petrol, but it rewards with lower weight and easier access to individual areas because the 4.0 R6 goes quite deep into the body. To sum up, if you find a nice example and do not have to have an automatic, the 2.5 petrol is a very good option. Is it worth buying a Jeep Cherokee XJ with a diesel engine? Here the choice comes down to choosing the lesser evil. Users' opinions are strongly divided. Some hang dogs on the 2.5 TD engine. Others defend it with the opinion, not as bad as they say. In turn, the 2.1 TD is simply weak and is not suitable for anything other than ordinary moving from point A to point B as a so-called daily. It is a good engine, but so old that with some spare parts, including the drivetrain, it is already starting to carve. Some time will pass, and most of the parts will have to be made because the used market is shrinking. The 2.5 TD is much easier to service, although here the design itself is terrible. The engine has 4 cylinders and 4 separate heads. These in turn tend to overheat and burn the gasket. In practice, the Cherokee used as an SUV, only occasional gentle off-road driving, and not overloaded with a trailer or high speed, can travel 300-400,000 kilometers without failure and enjoy good dynamics. The problem begins when the unfortunate head gasket, or worse, the head itself finally fails. It's hard to find a mechanic who will even undertake the repair, and one who will do it well. Usually once the engine is opened, i.e. the head is removed, it never closes for long. So is it worth buying a Cherokee XJ with diesel? Generally, it is not worth it because these engines do not convince even with fuel consumption, if we compare diesel with LPG. Also with performance. However, it may happen that we will find a car that interests us, relatively cheap, additionally in good condition, quite often with 2.5 TD, e.g. from the Italian market. Then, in my opinion, it's worth it. As long as the engine works, you can drive. Just be careful with the cooling system and temperature. If the engine gives up the ghost instead of spending money on repairs, it's worth thinking about a so-called swap, transplanting an engine from another manufacturer, for example, with an M57 from BMW or another unit. This is already such a popular solution that diesels that were worthless a few years ago are now starting to gain value. Typical faults and how to buy a good car. Don't expect a description like the one for newer popular models. The point is that it's hard to talk about specific typical faults, if only because of the age and intensity of use of many cars. Also because of the design which, by European standards, has never been refined enough to talk about any kind of reliability. The only area that can be called faulty in every model, even one after renovation, is the electrics. To get it in order, it would be necessary to do a new installation according to modern standards. In the Cherokee, everything can break down, from banal lights or electric window control, to the engine control computer, injection system, or engine accessories. We are talking about faults only in the electrics, although the accessories may also fail mechanically after so many years. In cars from the secondary market, chassis corrosion is a serious problem. Unfortunately, most cars are preserved, i.e. covered in black grease. This means that it is impossible to accurately determine the condition of the chassis without a thorough inspection, which sellers usually do not agree to. This involves tearing off the anti-corrosion layer in several places, tapping with a hammer or removing the upholstery. One thing is certain, if there is a thick layer of so-called Bittix on the chassis, then you should rather expect a lot of rot underneath it than good condition. On the other hand, if we buy a well-preserved car, we should demand from the seller photo documentation showing the condition before the work began and after its completion, and before preservation. What's more, we also need to trust that we are looking at the car we want to buy. Unfortunately, this topic is very difficult and requires great trust in the seller, and traders very often cheat buyers by applying any anti-corrosion treatment to rusty, often leaky chassis. The price includes, or at least should include, cars imported from warm countries where no maintenance is used and the chassis is in very good condition. The paint looks worse, but that is the least of the worries in this model. Mechanical faults are less to be concerned about. Suspension play, old, unsuitable tires, or a braking system close to degradation. These should be accepted as standard and not delved into too much. Non-functioning equipment elements should not even bother you. It is better to look at the leaks, not whether they exist, but which ones and from how many mechanisms, and listen to the operation of the drive system. The Eisen-Warner all-4 automatic transmissions used with the 4.0 engine are among the most durable automatic transmissions in the world. The strength and resistance to fatigue of this transmission is so great that if it shows any defects, the entire car can simply be worn out, or there is everything in the transmission except oil. The transmission must therefore work properly, and that's it. During the test drive, you should listen carefully to the work of the axles, the reduction gear, and the manual gearbox if you are looking at such a car. It is best to go with an experienced user of similar cars. Wrangler YJ Proterra Jewel, Grand Cherokee ZJ, WJ, because it is easier for them to assess the drive by the sounds it makes. In any case, you should expect that after buying the car, you will have to regenerate the differential mechanisms and/or the reduction gear. Fortunately, there is no problem with this. There are only costs. Besides, anything can break down in the Cherokee XJ, but you can also get lucky and drive without major faults for several years. You can also repair the car endlessly. Often, repairs of this car also involve modifications to what the manufacturer did wrong, so it is worth finding out from the seller what is not original and what is not. I will skip the issue of off-road modifications, because that is a topic for a separate, equally long text. Thanks for listening to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate my video. If you know any problems with this car that I didn't mention, be sure to write about them in the comments.